Scholars, today we are going to be talking about the digestive system. So we've talked about this juicy, delicious looking hamburger, but if we're looking at the size of a cell, that hamburger is way too big. We're not going to be able to fit it into that tiny cell. We know inside our hamburger we have delicious nutrients that we need, like carbohydrates, protein in the hamburger bun, delicious lipids in that tasty looking cheese. But our cell is so small. How are we going to fit all that great stuff that we need into that tiny little circle? Today, when we talk about the digestive system, we're going to be talking about how the carbohydrates are broken down into sugar, fatty acids from the lipids, and amino acids from the protein that are tiny enough to fit into our cell. The purpose and function of the digestive system is to make sure that we get the nutrients we need that are available in foods, and we can break them down so they fit into our cell. There are 4 stages to the digestive system that we're going to talk about. The first stage is ingestion. So this is when food is entering the body. This includes mechanical digestion, when you're literally chewing up that food, or in this cat's instance, chewing up that delicious cat food. The second stage is digestion. This happens both mechanically, by the churning of the esophagus through peristalsis and the churning of the stomach, and also chemically with lots of really excellent enzymes and acids. Our chemical digestion and mechanical digestion will ultimately be turning those pieces of foods into monomers. So we talked about the fatty acids that build up lipids, the sugars that build up carbohydrates, and the amino acids that build up protein. Absorption is when those tiny little monomers are actually able to enter the cells. And ultimately, that undigested material will be eliminated through excretion, or pooping. Like I said before, mechanical digestion is when food is physically being broken into smaller pieces. Like the chewing of the mouth will break apart those leaves into tiny little pieces. Chemical digestion is when you're taking an enzyme and you're using it to break apart a polymer into its monomers, or its tinier pieces. Like we talked about before, enzymes will hydrolyze these monomers into polymers, meaning that they'll use water to break the bonds between that protein or that polysaccharide to turn it into an amino acid, or in the case of a polysaccharide, into a monosaccharide. Make sure that you get this table down in your notes because we will be using it and referencing it in class. Absorption, that third stage, is when the nutrient monomers, so the tiny pieces of carbohydrate, the glucose, the tiny pieces of protein, the amino acids, are actually entering the cells. As far as structures go in the digestive system, there are some very important things to note. Looking at this diagram, the structures that are labeled in white are the major organs, and the ones that are in blue are those accessory organs. Major organs include the mouth, esophagus, intestines, rectum, and anus, and the food is going to pass through these specialized regions. As you can tell based on the picture, it looks like a giant tube. The accessory organs, including the salivary glands, the gallbladder, liver, and pancreas, these secrete digestive juices that are used in the major organs to break down food chemically. This is a picture that you have probably typically seen that shows the digestive system. Make sure that you get this in the notes so that you can reference it in class. Our journey is starting in the mouth. Just like we talked about with hydrolysis, that enzyme amylase is breaking apart those carbohydrates and breaking apart that starch into glucose, into smaller pieces. Food will then travel through the oral cavity, down the pharynx, through the esophagus, and into the stomach. Inside the stomach is where a lot of chemical digestion takes place. Organisms like to use pepsin to digest proteins, and there's also hydrochloric acid there to help kill any pathogens. Food then travels from the stomach to the small intestine, through the small intestine, into the large intestine, and then out the rectum. The accessory organs in this picture are labeled in blue to help remind you that they're not actually part of the food tube, but they do still have a special role in secreting different enzymes and different chemicals to help break down food. We're going to start our journey of our hamburger in the oral cavity. As you can tell, labeled on the left are the salivary glands. This is where the secretion of enzymes is occurring. So mechanical digestion of the food is occurring because the teeth are chewing up that food, and chemical digestion of starch, like we talked about in class, is occurring because the amylase is breaking apart that starch into our favorite molecule, glucose, or sugar. This picture on the right, we have our carbohydrate molecules, our little enzymes in our water. Through digestion, we're making our sugar molecules. This slide diagrams the epiglottis. The epiglottis is the flap that prevents food in the pharynx from entering the trachea. So as you can see in the picture, this is if you have food in your mouth, the epiglottis is going to be moving down. This blocks off the trachea, which is your windpipe, and allows that food to travel in a smooth transition down the esophagus to the stomach. The esophagus also serves as a very important way to get food and actually push it, similar to a toothpaste tube, into the stomach. So the food is moving here through the esophagus. The muscles will contract and push that food down, and when the muscles relax, they allow the passageway to open up again and for the food to move further down. This movement is called peristalsis. This slide shows the structure and the function of the stomach. So once the food enters the stomach, the gastric juices inside are going to be turning that food into something called chyme. So chyme is a substance that's broken down food, and if you've ever vomited, what you're vomiting up is chyme. The stomach is a muscular organ, and its elastic walls help to churn to mechanically digest that food. It also has a lot of chemical digestion occurring. So the hydrochloric acid that's secreted destroys pathogens, and it helps to chemically digest that food. Pepsin is another enzyme that's secreted that helps to break down protein. Ultimately, since your stomach is the place of so much acid, it has to find a way to protect itself. So the stomach also produces mucus that lines the stomach walls and helps to protect the stomach from hydrochloric acid and from harmful enzymes. Now we're going to talk about a key player in the digestive system, which is the small intestine. Once food leaves the stomach, it enters in the small intestine. The small intestine contains many enzymes that complete the chemical digestion of the nutrients. This digestion and this absorption is taking place at the villi. So the villi are these tiny protrusions from the lining of the small intestine. Underneath the protrusions are these layers of capillaries where the nutrient monomers are going to be absorbed into the bloodstream. There are some key accessory organs that help the small intestine to do its job. So some of the digestive enzymes itself are made by the small intestine, but the liver is going to help to make bile, which breaks down fat. The gallbladder is going to be storing that bile and secreting it into the intestine during a fatty meal. And then the pancreas is going to make several digestive enzymes for the intestine, including insulin, which we talked about before with the regulation of blood sugar. Finally, the food will travel through the large intestine, the rectum, and the anus. When the food is traveling through the large intestine, water is being absorbed from the leftover nutrient material to make feces or poop. The large intestine also contains friendly bacteria that help to make vitamins, and before the feces is expelled, it sits in the rectum where it is stored until eliminated. Now that we've traveled through the digestive system, try to quiz yourself by looking at the research check questions and also by studying this diagram and the key organs in the digestive system. Make sure to take your research check online and have an excellent evening.